Hi everyone, I'm Ronald Rudin from Concordia University, and I'm here today to try to interest you in my new book brought out by UBC Press called Against the Tides, Reshaping Landscape and Community in Canada's Maritime Marshlands. So this is the book about nature, knowledge, and community. It focuses upon a very distinct environment and the impact of human intervention. This environment is one that was created by the tides of the Bay of Fundy, which wash up the rivers in an area of both New Brunswick and Nova Scotia twice daily, depositing sediment on the land. And this sediment provided an ideal opportunity for marsh grasses to grow. And indeed, for tens of thousands of years before the arrival of Europeans, the Mi'kmaq First Nation depended upon these marsh grasses in order to survive. Europeans, first Acadians, and after their deportation, English speakers thought otherwise. And they decided that it was better to drain this marshland. And so they built dikes, structures that prevented water from washing up on land. And into the dikes, they built sluices, what they called abattoirs, that allowed water on the inland side of the dikes to drain out. Within a couple of years, it was possible to farm this land. And so the landscape had been fundamentally transformed. And indeed, for something like 3 centuries until the 1930s, people made a good living on this land. In particular, they grew hay. But by the 1930s, the hay economy was in difficulty. The internal combustion engine had displaced horses, which had consumed hay. And as a result, prices dropped, the prices for hay dropped, farmers' incomes declined, and they were unable to keep up the dikes at abattoirs. With the result that there were regular reports by the 30s and 40s of land going out to sea, to use the expression of the time. And this is where I pick up the story in the book, Against the Tides, because the federal government made the decision in 1948 that it was going to fix the problem. It created an agency called the Maritime Marshland Rehabilitation Administration, or the MMRA, to have a less awkward expression, which had the responsibility of fixing the problem. In the first instance, it effectively repaired the dikes at abattoirs, assembling engineers and heavy machinery, sometimes even borrowing from the local knowledge of the farmers. But the MMRA went even further. It made the decision by the 1960s, before it closed up shop at the beginning of the 1970s, that it would build dams at the mouths of a number of the major rivers. If the tides couldn't wash up the rivers, then the dikes in the abattoirs could simply be allowed to deteriorate and money could be saved. The MMRA was told by various parties that this was a bad idea, but in a kind of high modernist way, it decided it knew better and ignored that advice, with significant environmental consequences, particularly in the case of the Petticoatia Causeway built across the river at Moncton. The river was effectively destroyed, fish stocks decimated, and a large head pond was created, which was really kind of a symbol of this new environment that had been constructed. So the book allows us an opportunity to reflect upon these 3 different environments, all of which, to the people who lived there, who I either met in the archival record or through interviews, believe that they were all forms of nature. So this was an opportunity, I thought, in writing a book that would allow us to reflect on what we mean when we think about nature, but also what we mean by knowledge, because here were conflicting notions of what constituted knowledge, the expert knowledge of the engineers of the MMRA, and the more local knowledge, if you will, of the farmers. And finally, we see the impact of government intervention on a community, because farmers who had long worked for centuries, had worked together, were no longer doing that once the government intervened. So I figured when I found this story that a lot would have already been written on the subject, but in fact the archival sources had largely disappeared, and simply through dumb luck in basements and sheds of government facility, of provincial agricultural facilities in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, I found the archival record, and I was able to supplement that with interviews with people with various connections to this environment. So with all this material, I was able, in addition to the book, to produce a documentary film called Unnatural Landscapes that you could see at our website, unnaturallandscapes.ca. But I go much further than is possible in the film, in the book. I really enjoyed working on this project, and I hope you'll enjoy reading the book.